everyone, from Stockholm. Welcome to Green Hope Foundation's associated event at Stockholm+50 on Building Forward Equal from the COVID-19 pandemic through community stewardship driven by nature-based solutions. My name is Kehkasha. I am the founder president of Green Hope Foundation, and I am delighted to be your moderator for this event. As we all know, 50 years ago, the United Nations Conference on the Human Environment propagated the understanding that we, as human beings, must become responsible stewards of our planet, caring for each other and Mother Nature. And here we are, 50 years later, not quite there yet. The current decade that we espouse to be a decade of action has been more of one beset with crises, each seemingly more brutal than the other. Just as the world was crawling out of the pandemic lockdowns with hopes of a new era of positivity, cooperation, and multilateralism, the war on Ukraine ripped it apart, polarizing the global community in a manner reminiscent of World War II. As a consequence, the economic downturns caused by the pandemic have now deepened further with new disruptions of supply chains, spiraling inflation, rising oil prices, all combining to push us towards a recession that could very well derail the sustainable development process and deepen the chasm between the developed nations and global south even further. With the global powerhouses all distracted and focused on the ongoing war, the needs of developing nations, and especially the LDCs, are seemingly not a priority anymore. In just a few months, we have witnessed the tragic chain of events in the island nation of Sri Lanka that is now wallowing in debt. And if we do not work cohesively and with firm intent, many more struggling societies will face the same fate. At a time like this, it is critical that we try and rebuild from a grassroots level, empowering communities and becoming more self-reliant, leveraging the opportunities that exist in implementing and expanding nature-based solutions so that we can take positive steps in reducing our dependence on linear supply chains. At the same time, we cannot digress and lose sight of the climate action agenda. This makes it even more critical to adopt nature-based solutions, implementing the recommendations of the IPCC report and enabling change at a community level. As an organization who has been working at a grassroots level for more than a decade, we have witnessed firsthand how ecosystems across the globe are vulnerable to the effects of climate change, as are the communities that depend on them. However, ecosystems can also protect people from climate change impacts. As the evidence base strengthens, nature-based solutions are increasingly prominent in climate change adaptation, especially in developing nations. It is in this context that we have convened today, bringing together an eminent panel of subject matter experts who will put forward their views so that we can accelerate and guide the process of rebuilding forward by overcoming the challenges that confront us. Our first speakers today are Dr. Chantaline Carpentier, Chief, UNCTAD New York Office of the Secretary General, and Lika Sasaki, Program Management Officer, UNCTAD, who will share with us a joint presentation on today's topic. Chantaline and Lika, you have the floor.
Hello, my name is Chantaline Carpentier. I'm the Chief of the UNCTAD New York Office, the UN Conference on Trade and Development. We are facing a two-speed recovery in developed and developing countries that risk leaving millions of people behind. We need new economic models that have people and planet stewardship as explicit objectives. Indeed, current economic model can only achieve SDG 1 to 9 at the expense of SDG 10 to 16. Under the UN Network of Economists, we have been working on new economics for sustainable development. This audience will be familiar with the green economy, My colleagues, Lika, will present an example of biotrade in a few minutes. There's the circular economy that you're also familiar with. But then there's also the blue economy that sustainably extracts biodiversity from the seas and other water sources. There's the frugal economy with a business model based on volume, aiming to reach a large amount of vulnerable people with quality solutions and services at affordable prices, as opposed to high margin, lower volume models. We have the orange or creative economy based on creativity and digital, and the care economy that recognizes care as a public good that should be supported by the community, not just by women, which is essential to achieve gender equality. There's the social solidarity economy, to which the Manura cooperative, Lika will present in a few minutes, represent an example of. As a social solidarity economy is a distinct form of economy. It comprises, in addition to cooperatives, associations, mutual society, foundations, social enterprises, self-help group, and social movement and network, operating in both the formal and the informal economy. Social solidarity economy organizations aim to achieve social, democratic, and emancipatory objectives, as well as profit, not only profit. Thank you, and I give the floor now to my colleague, Lika.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lika, and I am from the Biotrade Initiative at UNCTAD. Now let me load my slides. In my presentation, I would like to first give you an introduction to Biotrade and to explain about our guidelines, the Biotrade principles and criteria, especially in how it applies to biodiversity conservation and what are the benefits of incorporating these guidelines into businesses and processes. I will also share some of our case studies from our Biotrade partners' experience to illustrate how Biotrade works on the ground. But first of all, I want to give a brief explanation on what is UNCTAD, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. We are the UN agency based in Geneva, Switzerland, that is focused on the interface of trade and development. We sometimes get asked, why are we, an agency focused on trade, involved in biodiversity issues? As you very well know, biodiversity plays a huge role in our economy. Over half the world's GDP comes from the direct use of biodiversity, in which trade definitely plays a big role. But biodiversity needs to be used sustainably in order for the economy and our trade to continue to benefit everyone. So based on this need, the Biotrade Initiative was launched, and we promote the concept of biotrade. So what exactly then is biotrade? Biotrade is the commercialization of goods and services derived from biodiversity that adhere to a set of sustainability guidelines, which are the Biotrade principles and criteria, and it serves as a foundation to all of our activities at the Biotrade Initiative. Since we first launched in 1996, for over a quarter century, we have been developing a unique portfolio of national, regional, and global biotrade programs, as well as strengthening our network of partners and practitioners working in close to 100 countries. Biotrade is implemented in a variety of sectors, as you can see here, including the food sector, personal care sector, cosmetics, phytopharma, tourism, fashion, etc. Biotrade products includes, for example, cosmetics made from marula oil from Namibia, herbal plants used for fragrance such as prickly ash from LPDR, spices such as cinnamon, peppercorn from India, birdwatching tourism in Ecuador, and many others. And when we say biotrade-related products, it means that these products and services are commercialized and produced in a way that abides by the Biotrade principles and criteria. The Biotrade principles and criteria has 7 principles, which are conservation of biodiversity, sustainable use of biodiversity, fair and equitable sharing of benefits, socioeconomic sustainability, legal compliance, respect for the rights of actors, and clarity on the right to use and access the natural resources. Additionally, there are also 25 criteria that go along with these principles. It's very important to note that the principles and criteria are guidelines. They are not a standard or a certification scheme, so they are publicly accessible to anyone, and it is flexible to be adapted by everyone. For example, we work with governments who use the principles and criteria to develop their own national biotrade programs, as well as adapt them to create their national guidelines and tools. So how can these guidelines help to contribute to biodiversity conservation, especially now when there's just so many other guidelines, standards, and certifications that focus on the areas of environment and sustainability. First of all, the biodiversity principles and criteria are one of the very few guidelines that not only explores how to mitigate biodiversity loss, but also on biodiversity recovery and how to become more biodiversity resilient. And this is very crucial because ecosystem and natural habitats should not only be maintained, but also be restored and enhanced. Secondly, because the principles and criteria are so malleable, it ensures that biodiversity conservation is applicable across different areas, contexts, and sectors. I've already mentioned that we work with governments, and we also work with NGOs and community-based initiatives to enhance their capabilities to develop, for example, sustainably sourced programs, traceability systems, value chain methodologies, and so on. Thirdly, the principles and criteria are in line and abide by other environmental global conventions and agreements. We are compliant with the Convention of Biological Diversity, CBD, with CITES, as well as the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement on Climate Change. Fourthly, adapting the biodiversity principles and criteria into businesses can not only make their products biodiversity friendly, but it will make it more resilient because the biodiversity principles and criteria can help build more sustainable and durable supply chains. This is especially relevant now as we are going through supply chain issues and sourcing issues due to various ongoing global conflicts. And lastly, the biodiversity principles and criteria is not just a theoretical concept, but it's based on real experiences from actual practitioners who have been implementing biotrade and its guidelines on the ground for almost 2 decades. It has been tested, adapted, and improved over the years, including over a year of comprehensive reassessment for the updated version that was published in 2020. So I've given you a bit of context of what is biotrade and what are the biotrade principles and criteria, but how is it applied on the ground? I want to give you 2 examples of biotrade companies, one from Latin America and the other from Africa. In my first case, I would like to illustrate how adding economic value to biodiversity can provide incentives for conservation. Ucuba is a fruit from the ucubaíra tree, which grows in the Amazon region in Brazil, traditionally used for logging, but it became listed as an endangered species in 1992. However, it continued to be illegally logged in the local communities because they didn't have any other income to support themselves. Natura Cosmetics is one of the world's biggest Brazilian personal care and cosmetics company, and through research, they found that the seed of this fruit contains butter, which can be transferred into beauty products like body creams and soaps. These products were commercialized by Natura, and a benefit-sharing contract was signed with the local communities. This means that for every Ucuba product that Natura sells, a percentage of the profit goes towards these communities. The people that harvest the fruit will also receive an income. This resulted in the conservation of an area of over 60,000 hectares in the rainforest and saving over 5,000 trees annually, and it now brings an income to over 1,000 families in the community. These communities are no longer cutting down the trees because they now realize that by harvesting the fruits, they can earn 3 times more than cutting them down. So as a result, it stopped the trends of deforestation and habitat loss in the area. My next case is from the Southern African region. When we talk about sustainable production, it doesn't only mean in terms of preventing environmental degradation, but it also means to give back to the local community. The Utafano Winds Cooperative is in Namibia with the mission to promote and commercialize indigenous plants in a way that's not overexploited. One of them is the marula fruit, which they collect and extract 12 tons of oil per year, which is then sold to global companies like The Body Shop. Currently, about 2,500 women are working in this cooperative, and in 2020, the sales for marula oil jumped by 14% from the previous year, and they made a profit of approximately $15 million US. The cooperative harvests in line using the biodiversity principles and criteria, which allows for the plants to not be over-harvested and respect the rights of all actors. The cooperative also invests back into the local community and making a positive impact, such as running schools for the children. These are just 2 of the many cases of how biotrade has been implemented on the ground with the support of our partners all over the world. So thank you very much for your interest and your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chantaline and Lika, for highlighting the role of a social solidarity economy and biotrade in propagating community stewardship for a healthy planet through nature-based solutions, and how UNCTAD is taking this forward from the trade perspective. I shall now invite our next speaker, the Venerable Dr. Damadipa Sak, abbot of the U.S. Zen Institute in Maryland and trustee on the board of the Parliament of the World's Religions, to take the floor. Damadipa, the floor is yours.
My name is Damadipa Sak, a Buddhist monk or bhikkhu who ordained 34 years ago under the Theravada tradition. To begin with, I would like to express my admiration to the brilliant young board of directors of Green Hope Foundation for their advocacy on various pressing contemporary issues, from banning nuclear weapons to coping with the climate change and loss of biodiversity. I wish you great success in the upcoming Stockholm+50 meeting. I have found resonance in Green Hope Foundation's voice on the issue of the asymmetric impact of the COVID-19, as well as their approach on how to deal with the crisis by the intergenerational, interfaith, multidisciplinary approach. My understanding of this asymmetric impact could be attributed to the nature of capitalism, which is based upon the private ownership of the means of production and their operation for profit. Certainly, for the past couple of centuries, some of us who live in the developed society have experienced a tremendous upside in our economic development. Yet, the rest of us, some say out of 25% of the world's population, live in poverty and suffer greatly in their daily lives. To alleviate the sufferings caused by the endless pursuit of profits through private ownership, we might want to shift the heavily capitalism-leaning paradigm to community stewardship. Instead of declaring ownership of natural and human resources, materials, capital, and labor, we should focus on fostering entrustment in which each actor of our community could have equal weight to care, protect, and manage our resources. No one should claim absolute ownership over our natural resources. This concept of community stewardship is well pronounced through the Buddhist teachings of non-self, anatta in Pali language, and atma in Sanskrit language, which occurs in numerous early Buddhist texts. One of such could be found in the discourses with Venerable Monk Rahula, the son of the Prince Siddhartha, before the Prince Siddhartha became the Buddha. When the Buddha returned to his native hometown of Kapilavatthu in the first year after the enlightenment, he had Rahula ordained as a novice, and thereafter often gave him instruction. In his advice to his son, the Buddha addresses his son thus: Rahula, any kind of material form, whatever, whether past, future, or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, all material should be seen as it actually is with proper wisdom thus. This is not mine. This I am not. This is not myself. Not only material form, Rahula, also feeling, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. By non-self, the Buddha means that all phenomena in the world around us are interrelated by countless conditions, which themselves are conditioned by other conditions. Because of greed, hatred, and delusion, one could not comprehend the truth or reality. Thus, this one would keep trapped in the vicious circle of giving rise to greed, hatred, and delusion continuously without end. He would keep excessive greed for possession of things in such a way that he could exercise all means, including exploiting others to reach his goal. This vicious circle could come to a stop only when we start to shift our worldview that we ourselves cannot be the owner of the world that we live in. Because if there is an owner, there will be the one being owned. This is not only against the Buddhist teachings of the ultimate truth of non-self, but also a source of great suffering, especially for those who are the subjects of being owned. This is why I particularly resonate with Green Hope Foundation's message on calling to build stronger community stewardship that is driven by natural-based solution to build forward better into a world that is healthy and equitable for people and the planet. I believe this community stewardship is based on love and compassion with a deep understanding of our common sufferings and a desire to be alleviated from the suffering. This love and compassion would serve as the most solid foundation and sustain us spiritually for our collective efforts to tackle the Earth's triple planetary crisis: climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. In the end, I wish you all 5 peace and joy in your lives, and have a successful gathering virtually online and in the beautiful city of Stockholm. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dhammadippa, for speaking to us from a Buddhist perspective, sharing how taking care of our people and planet is something that is deeply ingrained in us, and that we need to shift our worldview to understand that we do not own the earth we live on. I shall now invite our next speaker, Reverend Stephen Avino, Executive Director of the Parliament of the World's Religions. Stephen, you have the floor.
Hello, my name is Stephen Avino, and I am the Executive Director of the Parliament of the World's Religions, the world's premier interfaith convening organization. I was asked to speak on how we can build back better after a devastating pandemic that revealed to all of us the inequalities and injustices that infest our world. One way to build back better is to demand better of ourselves and our leaders. In this moment in history, we are being called to conscience. The theme of the upcoming 2023 Parliament of the World's Religions is a call to conscience, defending freedom and human rights. The reason for this is that the Parliament was compelled to address the most pressing issues of our time. Freedom, human rights, and democracy are under attack all over the world. The most vulnerable in our society are not being given a seat at the table. Climate change continues to threaten all of life on this planet. The Parliament started 2022 calling attention to the attack on the human right to vote in the country where the next Parliament convening will be held. And we have released a clear statement on the illegal invasion of Ukraine. These are just some of the myriad examples of current events that demonstrate a rise of autocracy and a lack of care for our fellow human beings. People of faith and conscience must stand up together in all their diversity and defend freedom and human rights before we can build back better after this pandemic. We must demand that our leaders make choices that are fair to everyone and not just choices that enrich their bank accounts. In my own country, children were brutally murdered in an elementary school last week. Children. This is a serious problem, yet there are leaders who are more concerned about securing their bank accounts from the gun lobby than the lives of those children. We must demand that our leaders also be called to conscience. We must return to our values and our ethics. At the 1993 Parliament in Chicago, the Declaration Towards a Global Ethic affirmed human rights as defined in the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights from the United Nations. The global ethic also states, and I quote, "After 2 world wars and the end of the Cold War, the collapse of fascism and Nazism, the shaking to the foundations of communism and colonialism, humanity has entered a new phase of its history. Today we possess sufficient economic, cultural, and spiritual resources to introduce a vision of peoples living peacefully together, of ethnic and ethical groupings, and of religions sharing responsibility for the care of the earth. A vision rests on hopes, goals, ideals, standards. It is the communities of faith who bear responsibility to demonstrate that such hopes, ideals, and standards can be guarded, grounded, and lived. This remains true 3 decades later, and it is certainly true after a devastating pandemic, which only exacerbated inequalities and injustices in our world. We must non-violently guard and exemplify these hopes, ideals, and standards, and not let the world slip back into the old phase of history. It is our moral responsibility to protect those who are most vulnerable in our society. All the people of this world must be listened to, and must have a seat at this table for us to work together to build back better. My dream for the 2023 Parliament in Chicago is that it will once again be a place where we can all come together and work out together equitable and, yes, nature-based solutions to the problems of the day. The 2023 Parliament convening in Chicago will address the threat of climate change, the dignity of women and girls, the rights of indigenous peoples, the engagement of the next generation, peace, justice, the reductions of inequalities, and more. The Parliament continues to use the word parliament according to its archaic meaning, a safe place for civil discourse. It will be a place of open minds and open hearts, where we can all express the wonder and dignity of our religious and spiritual traditions and the values that they embody for us. But we cannot do all this without addressing the foundational issues of our time, the threat to freedom and human rights. We must defend freedom and human rights together and find solutions to the rise of autocracy in our world. The world was called to Chicago in 1893 and 1993. 30 years later, the world is called again. Please join us if you can. But to conclude, we need to demand better of ourselves and of our leaders. The future of our planet need not be bleak. As people of faith, we can fix this world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for bringing in the interfaith perspective on how we must adopt nature-based solutions for a safer, sustainable planet and the work that the Parliament of the World's Religions is doing to promote love and empathy for our fellow human beings and the planet. I shall now invite our next speaker, Alexandra Masako Gosens-Ishii, Program Coordinator for Environment and Climate Change, Soka Gakkai International Office for UN Affairs, Geneva. Alex, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, Keshakan and the organizers for inviting me to speak today on the topic of building resilience for people and the planet as we celebrate and take stock of the 50 years since the Stockholm Declaration. My name is Alexandra Gosansichi. I'm a program coordinator on environment and climate change at the Soka Gakkai International Office for UN Affairs. So Soka Gakkai is a diverse Buddhist community of 12 million people that promotes peace, culture, and education. And Soka Gakkai International, SGI, is an NGO in consultative status with the UN that strives to strengthen connections between individuals, civil society, and the UN. Speaking to today's topic, so I would like to share some reflections based on SGI annual peace proposals that are issued to the UN, as well as sharing an example of community-led efforts to restore harmony between people and the planet. So maybe first, really as a reflection, the global COVID-19 pandemic has really shaken us, and hopefully it has also awakened us to the interdependence between all living beings and their environment, as we realize that the pandemic crisis and the increase of zoonotic disease are related to the loss of biodiversity and are the result of the deep imbalances that we have created in our ecosystems because of our exploitation of natural resources, our consumption-driven lifestyles that are really exceeding the capacity of Mother Earth to sustain us. At the same time, as UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres as mentioned, he has described how COVID-19 can be likened to an X-ray, revealing fractures in the fragile skeleton of the societies we've built. And he has called for the development of a new social contract for a new era. That really resonates with the Buddhist principles. And in the Buddhist philosophy, there is one principle of changing poison into medicine that teaches that even the darkest and most desperate of times can contain the seeds of new learning and possibilities. So resilience, I was very interested to learn that originally it derives from physics, and it describes the elasticity or ability of a material to return to its original form after having been subjected to shock or external stress. And so by analogy, resilience has come to be used in a wide range of fields to express the capacity of societies to recover from severe shocks, such as the environmental destruction, the economic crisis, the COVID pandemic. But now, in this context of really understanding that before was not really the normal that we would need to return to, on the contrary, building resilience should really be conceived as creating a new future and not just recover or go back. So in this sense, improving resilience means enhancing the whole spectrum of capacities to create a just transition for people and the planet together. To this end, of course, policy and institutional responses such as capacity building, laws, actions at the government level are of course important, but the human element is also critical. And so community-led actions, solidarity, and activisms are key to create change. More than anything, the will and the vitality of the people living in the community are key. From the Buddhist perspective, we focus on reforming and opening up the inner capacities of our lives as a key to enabling effective change and empowerment on a global scale. So this is the challenge of creating value, the process by which each of us, in our respective roles and capacities, we strive to create that value that is ours alone, in order to benefit our fellow citizens, society, our environment as a whole, and the future. So now I would like to share with you an example of really community-led action stewardship to really restore this relationship between people and nature in a mutual beneficial way. And that example is the project led by Cécile Ngebet, so Miss Ngebet, who's the founder and president of the African Women's Network for Community Management of Forests, REFACOF. And that project has been supported by the International Tropical Timber Organization and Sokagakai. So Miss Ngebet is an agronomist and she's a social forester, and she actually received the Wangari Maathai Forest Champion Award earlier this month for all her work with REFACOF. The project I was mentioning is taking place in Togo, and it focuses on women's capacity building in agroforestry to support afforestation and the protection of forest resources in places where there has been rapid loss of the tree cover, while also enabling them to gain livelihood and financial independence. So far, more than 100 women have planted over 30,000 seedlings, and they've been trained in nursery production and agroforestry. So due to culture and traditions, what Mrs. Ngebet was explaining and mentioning throughout the project, that through culture and traditions, poor women have had limited rights to land and property. So one of the actions of REFACOF has been to push for reform for access to forests to women, and for laws to enable forests to be managed by the communities and not by the states. So in most countries where REFACOF is present, forests are managed by the states. But in general also, women don't have a secure access to forests. So for REFACOF, this is really one of the key fights to make that change in the laws, to really have not just citizens as a whole, but really to have specifically women and men mentioned in terms of access to forest and to the land, because if not, due to culture and traditions, women are left behind. REFACOF's goal, and it's really well in progress, is to plant no less than 5 million trees in the mangrove area of the various countries it's taking place, to contribute to mangrove restoration as well, with the holistic view of that as the mangroves are restored, it also leads to restoration of biodiversity, for instance, also to fish to come back, and for this to provide livelihood to communities who live from fish in the mangrove areas. Ms. Ngebet was saying that women who have experienced this project will now visit different areas in Togo, so that they themselves can share their experiences, and they can really implement initiatives and learn from each other in various communities. So this is the example I wanted to share, and from my own perspective and experience in advocacy with the advocacy work that we're engaged with, I would like to maybe mention two more elements. So one is from this community-led action that is really seeking to change the relationship that we have between people and planet. One is the advocacy for the right to a healthy environment, to be recognized now at the UN General Assembly this year. It was really through the advocacy of thousands of civil society organizations, indigenous peoples organizations, youth movements, social movements that really came together and advocated for the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment to be recognized at the Human Rights Council last year. And it was recognized in October last year. And so while this is really a human right now, the next goal is to bring it to a recognition or affirmation by the UN General Assembly, because this really proves to be a catalyst for changing and implementing laws and policies in various communities and countries. And the second, maybe brief example I would like to share is from the Biodiversity Convention forum, where it's really from the indigenous peoples, local communities, that the call for really the securing of land rights, land tenure, respecting of these land rights of indigenous peoples and local communities who are really the ones who are taking care of local biodiversity and communities to be fully integrated, respected, implemented in the new framework that is being negotiated for biodiversity, which is called the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. And so this is also really from the community a very clear call and based on experience for their implementation, so that we don't end up with nature-based solutions that could really go against human rights and the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities, where it could lead, for instance, to whole territories, resources like really reservoirs of biodiversity where people live as well, to be for people so to be pushed for this land to be for instance offset and for offset mechanisms to be taking place. So this is another maybe example from the global advocacy experience. So now to conclude, reflecting also upon the Great Green Belt movement that was founded by the Kenyan environmental activist Wangari Maathai, which began with the planting of just 7 saplings and that resulted in more than 50 million newly planted trees in Kenya. What I find really interesting is that we can really find also in the REFACOF project example is the interconnected approach. So that will to address the interwoven issues of food security, fuel wood shortages, soil erosion, clean water, poverty, environmental conservation. And I think really that Dr. Matai's love for nature, her love for the trees, but also her love for her fellow human beings has really touched and inspired many others, so including the founder of REFACOF, Miss Njebet. To conclude, I think that it's really by cultivating and by expanding that kind of love, starting with that love for ourselves, to really cultivate that and to expand it to others, that we can rebraid the tapestry of our lives, restoring the ways in which we connect to others and to the environment. And with that, I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alex, for sharing the work that Soragakai International is doing to promote community and environmental stewardship globally so that we are able to restore peace in our world once again. I shall now invite our next speaker, Sarah Lehman-Svensson, environmental and climate strategist, Anglingsås Municipality and chapter head of Green Hope Foundation, Sweden. Sarah, the floor is yours.
So, hey everyone. Thank you for joining us from all your local places around the world in this webinar today. Thank you for the opportunity to join you from Stockholm to greet you at the occasion of Stockholm+50. So this webinar with Green Hope is about building back better after COVID-19. And when talking about this topic of the pandemic, I really feel my heart going out to all those people who lost something really dear to them or someone, like my family who lost valuable people who died in the pandemic. And so many people were affected on devastating levels, and it can be really, really difficult to accept on an individual level. It hurts. But now we really need to just find ways to move forward. And we are still in a very turbulent time on this planet. We are facing serious environmental degradation, biodiversity loss, climate change, and all those crises are deeply related with the pandemic. The pandemic was a symptom that tried to wake us up to that something is really out of balance with life on Earth, and that we have to do something about it. So yeah, we need to find ways to build resilience, both inside ourselves, in our societies, and in our ecosystems on this planet. And to use nature-based solutions to do that, to really look to nature and give nature a chance to help us to move forward out of this. And yeah, I started to like to think about the pandemic as a teacher for us. So if the pandemic was our teacher, what did it want to show us? And I think, yeah, one of the things that the pandemic did to a lot of humans was to make us stay at home a bit more than we would have done otherwise, or that we wanted to. I know many of my friends and neighbors, they felt really trapped at home, like between those four walls, and not being able to go anywhere, had to cancel all social appointments. But then, after a while, also really started to notice more what's actually around us. I know some of my friends talked about that they looked out the window and, oh, there is a beautiful tree over there. And it's changing colors. The leaves are slowly changing, and birds are flying by, sitting down for a while and moving on. Like all those small things that are actually really wonderful, but that we didn't notice before. So I feel that the pandemic told us people to slow down, just listen, just notice what's around you. Stop moving so fast. Time is urgent, that no question about it. There are so many crises and we're running out of time, but that doesn't mean that we need to move faster. We are moving too fast already, so just stop, slow down, do less. Yeah, maybe that's the solution, to just be here, really calm where you are. So maybe the pandemic asked us, do you know where your home is? I'm asking you to stay at home. Do you feel it? Do you know that your body is your home? Do you appreciate that this planet is your home and providing everything for you? Yeah, so think about that for a second. Or longer. Yeah, and start noticing it, start feeling it in your body. Yeah. The pandemic really made us think about what do you love so much that you don't want to lose it? What is the essence that makes life meaningful for you? And that's a question I think is really important as well. And yeah, to start to appreciate that. Because many of us, like me, grew up in a consumerist society. And in such a society, that is totally based on the myth that you need to always strive for more, always try to work really hard, work all the time to be successful, to earn money, to be able to buy stuff that you don't even have time to enjoy. And in such a society, just showing gratitude to what you already have is a really radical act. So just to have the courage to step out of it and to say, no, I'm happy. I have what I need. That is really radical. So if we did that more, it would really change something in the world. And yeah. So think about the miracle of life. So go back to the question, how does life work? And when we do that, I think that nature can really be a good teacher. So just look, for example, at a plant. What does a plant need to grow? It needs to be rooted in good soil. It needs to get nutrients. It needs to get water through its roots. It needs air, and it needs sunshine for this photosynthesis to work. And yeah, a plant is an ecosystem. And so are we. Like, each of our human bodies is an ecosystem in itself. And we need basically the same thing. We need air, water, food, and like fire, sunshine. Yeah, we are all ecosystems, and we are part of greater ecosystems, like all interconnected, until we become this big ecosystem of planet Earth. And our planet provides everything we need to thrive. It's really a wonder that the planet is located in the universe exactly where it is, exactly where it can provide us with all those life-supporting elements. That water, most water on the planet is, in a floating form, liquid, and that we have an atmosphere that makes it possible to breathe. And everything is really here for us. And we're here today to mark the 50th anniversary of environmental negotiations in the United Nations. For 50 years, humans have tried to solve environmental problems on a global level together. And 50 years, it's such a tiny fraction of the time that life has existed on this planet. And that gives us some perspective, really. Life started in very simple forms, and then it evolved until it became what we are today. All previous life forms are actually our ancestors in true terms. And we can look back and tap into that enormous pool of wisdom, original ancient knowledge that we can learn from. It doesn't mean that we have to go back to something old and live in exactly the same way, but those basic essentials of life, those lessons, we have to return back to them, and we can learn so much. And for me, at least, what I really, really want to contribute to on this planet right now is to change the things that need to be changed, to make it possible to have vibrant life thriving and flourishing on this planet also in the future. And I think the best way I can do that is to just show gratitude to what I get from the planet, and to show so much gratitude, to feel it really until it floats over, so that I start sharing my natural gifts, like all the plants and all the animals, everyone does in nature. Like, if you're an apple tree, you share apples, like, abundantly for everyone who passes by. If you're a mango tree, you share mangoes instead. And the same thing I think human beings need to do. Like, just be who you are. Just share your natural gifts by doing what you love, what comes natural to you. And then that will start radiating out and inspiring other people to also be themselves and to do good things, great things together. And that's the way that when we are no longer here on this planet, which will happen to all of us, like in this physical form, then we can become good ancestors for future generations. And that's really a wonderful goal that I have with my life. Yeah. And indigenous peoples, many indigenous peoples have kept this in their core. They already know, they still know this ancient knowledge. They know that everything in nature is alive and sacred, and they honor it to ceremonies with the elements, like water is sacred, fire, everything is sacred. And I'm not born as an indigenous person, but I can choose to also appreciate this and start to show it, and that brings me a lot of joy. Yeah, so I think that if enough people do this, then we can really make things happen in a good way. So thank you for being who you are on this planet. Just be you. There's nobody who can replace you. So thank you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing your views with us and for emphasizing the importance of all of us reconnecting with nature and taking into account the teachings of those who have lived in harmony with nature for centuries, so that we are able to create a sustainable world for all. This brings us to the end of our event. This has truly been an amazingly insightful discussion. We are deeply grateful to our eminent panelists who have brought such a wide, diverse spectrum of perspectives to address the theme that has laid out several options that we can leverage to drive this agenda of community stewardship through the adaptation of nature-based solutions. While the current challenges remain daunting, we require ingenious approaches, and today's discussion has most certainly brought forward several such modalities that we can act upon. I would like to once again thank our panelists who, despite their extremely busy schedules, shared their experiences and wisdom. We need to act with purpose. We must not lose resolve, and we must move ahead expeditiously. Please stay safe, and we look forward to your participation at Green Hope Foundation's forthcoming events. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of Stockholm+50. Thank you and goodbye.